Welcome back to another episode of Covered with the Utah FOP. I'm your host, Brett Rawson, here with some of the usual suspects. We've got Brent Jecks in the house. How you doing, Brent?
I'm doing good.
And Kevin Murray's here.
Hello.
Hey, and I brought a couple of friends today. Yes, I did. I brought Nate Nelson from Nelson Jones. You heard of that place, right?
I saw a billboard a couple of times on the freeway.
Yeah.
And
Big fat guys on the billboard?
In fact, in this exact position, I think if you guys folded your arms and looked at each other.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about that, why that happened and is continuing to happen, but not to preempt that, but yeah, we do have some billboards out there. We have a little explaining to do about that. Also brought my kid. That's the one in the corner over there. So it's bring your 21-year-old to work day. And he just got back from the Amazon. And I don't know, we might ask him about that later if he's willing to get near a microphone.
I named a hurry and grow a beard so I can yank on it and pay him back for
like
8 years ago.
Those times when he was a youngster and liked to yank
Cheater.
on the beard. Yeah.
Cheater.
Was that water polo?
Water polo.
Mm-hmm.
But lava.
Yeah. He's basically a terrible person.
He's a cheater.
Yeah. Well, but that's not what we came to talk about. Not so much. Really, really worried watching the news about folks back east. I've lived in some of those places. I've been personally in 5 hurricanes, and every one of them was super scary. I don't recall as bad as some of those were, the level of destruction that we're seeing in the news this week. And I was thinking about DART. Brent, can you tell the folks what that is, what it stands for, and what they do?
Yeah. So DART is the National FOP's Disaster Area Response Team, which I'm a member of, and we've been getting notifications and put on standby. And this time we ended up with 2 deployments out of it. Because of my shoulder, I'm not deployable for this one. Which sucks because we ended up responding to just east of Knoxville, Tennessee, between Knoxville and Nashville, North Carolina, and then in South Carolina, where they're talking the devastation. In fact, the teams, as the teams respond, have to choose your routes carefully because you can't go from one of the destinations over to the other, right? Because I-40 is completely washed out. They had a dam break.
Oh wow!
In eastern Tennessee, and it completely wiped out that area. The devastation in Asheville. They say it's the equivalent of several F5 tornadoes.
Yeah,
hitting, and 30 inches of rain in 24 hours and.
It's incredible. If you've never witnessed something like that, it's hard to even put into words. It's almost impossible to imagine that something like that is possible. And I growing up, in the Marine Corps, we moved a lot. And like I said, I've been in, a handful of hurricanes. I was in Hurricane David and Hugo and Isabel, and, there were a number of them there. And I remember looking at I-95 in the East Coast, and it looked like somebody took a giant lawnmower about 100, 120 feet off the ground, and every pine tree at that level had just been mowed over. And it was like they cut them clean. I remember looking at it going, well, how did that happen? It's just the sheer force of the wind, as it whips through, and there's just really nothing like it. Later, there was a lesser hurricane that came through. It wasn't a 4 or 5, it was more like a 1, and I left town. I remember my father-in-law saying, "It's just a 1. Why are you leaving town?" And, I'm sorry. I flee hurricanes. There's an old saying, I'm not afraid of anybody but God and hurricanes, and there's a reason why hurricanes are listed in that. The force is unbelievable.
Well, you remember when we went down to Gulf Shores,
I do.
Alabama on that one.
Yeah.
And, we drove down to Alabama, and I remember when we got there in the middle of the night, like power was out and you couldn't really see. We pull into where the rest of the DART team is, and the tree that we parked by this big tree is literally twisted in a spiral. And I still have the photos of it, and I thought, okay, this is interesting. And then we're driving out to do some remediation. There was a sergeant with Gulf Shores Police Department who he'd been at work. We got the report that some trees fell on his house and that his family was still inside the house. So we load up the trucks, and Lowe's donated 2 reclamation trailers to us. Donated the trailers, the smaller enclosed single axle trailers, and they filled them with tools, with chainsaws, with picks, with everything that we'd need for remediation, and it was all donated by Lowe's. And so we go, and I remember driving through the neighborhood, and I'm like, well, I mean, where did the hurricane come through? And then we turned a corner, and it was just, I couldn't believe, I'd never seen anything like that before. And I remember driving down the road, and it's one of those where you're driving around, falling. I mean, there were lines down, there were trees down everywhere. We were all in trucks and kind of driving off the road and maneuvering around. And I remember turning onto the road, and I'm like, oh, please let it be the house to the left. And it wasn't the house to the left; it was the house to the right, and you could not see the house. Yeah, they had a still and timber structure that like a carport, and it was resting on top of the guy had an H2 Hummer, and it was pancake.
Only thing holding it up was the Hummer.
Yeah, I mean, it just uttered. And so we spent a good portion of the day cutting the path. It was
a great
house.
day. I mean,
it was.
To volunteer in circumstances like that, there's nothing quite like it. The sense of satisfaction to help people like that. I really appreciated going on that trip because it reminded me of my childhood growing up in areas that were routinely hit by hurricanes. But, to go in there and help first responders who were out working, could not get away from their job to go help their families and to literally unbury their homes while they continued to work the job. That was a great thing.
Do you remember the old guy across the street?
I do.
So we're sitting there, everybody was trying to take care of the yard, and right across the street from this place is this 2-story brick house, really tall tree, uprooted at the base, and the tree is still intact but laying on this guy's house. And the house was still intact too. And there's this probably late 70s, early 80s year old guy out there with his wife, and they're trying to do some of this stuff, and he gets a cut on his hand, and I had gone over to the truck for something, and I was like, well, hey, let's take care of your cut. And so so we get over there, and Scott from North Carolina starts talking to him, and turns out he's a retired cop, and he and the way they do things in Alabama is their FOP signups is there's an application, and you have to have a signed, like you have to be sponsored into the FOP. And he goes, I'm retired. He goes, I've been wanting to join a lodge down here. He goes, but I need either the state president or something like that to sign the form. We were like, well, how about the national president? Because Pat Yost goes on all these call outs. He gets right in the middle of the, works the chainsaw. He works just as hard, if not harder than anybody there. And so it was really cool. And then we were able to peel off 5 or 6 guys that went over and helped them at least get their home to a point that it was manageable. So
signed him right into the FOP right there. It was fantastic.
Yeah, really great experience given the circumstances and the devastation of doing that. But the thing is, you go on these and you learn a lot about, are we ready for something like that? Right. Now we don't get hurricanes here, but there are enough things that happen. Sure,
between earthquakes and tornadoes, there's plenty of opportunity. Wildfires, that's another. Plenty of opportunity that we should be thinking about and preparing for. And, because of the line of work that our listeners are in, it's always good to think about, well, if you're at work, what will sustain your family while you're on the job? Do you have some supplies, some food storage? Is there a plan to meet up with the rest of your family in a location pre-planned, because you can't assume that the phones are going to work. In fact, I can recall being in some of these areas. One hit Southern Virginia when I was in law school, and I remember, and that may not even have been a hurricane. It probably was just a severe storm, but lost power, lost the ability to communicate. To go just a few days without ice or air conditioning, when it's hot, that can be a game changer for a lot of people who have not experienced that. But anyway, have a plan. Thoughts and prayers with the folks back east. I realize by the time that this airs, hopefully that's all cleaned up. Well, the rebuild will be going on for years, it appears. Some of these communities will never be the same. And I'm hearing now that there are counties that have lost as many as 30 people in a single county. So widespread devastation. So sorry about that. And again, prayers with those folks. All right, moving on to something a little lighter. You mentioned a couple of big fat guys on a billboard. Let's talk about that. So one of those guys, and you're not looking so chunky today. There must have been a time difference between when those pictures were taken and as you sit here today, Mr. Nelson.
A few months ago.
Yeah. Yep. Why did we let them take our pictures when we were so round?
The marketing guy says it's time, and you just do what he says.
Yeah, and maybe there was maybe there's a particular demographic we were going after. I'm not sure. Chubby chasers, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know.
They're out there.
They're out there. Well, so we're on some billboards. People have asked me, so what in the world, you guys are the FOP attorneys, and, what is this personal injury stuff? Well, the fact of the matter is we've always done personal injury. We have, and most of our personal injury clients have been law enforcement. And so we've had many, many cases over the years. We've taken care of a lot of folks that have been injured in accidents. And the type of law that we do, we love taking care of the little guy at Nelson Jones. If you think about even the nature of our administrative law, where we're, for a lack of a better way of putting it, we're fighting the man, on behalf of the line officer that's, found themselves in a little bit of trouble, or at least some allegations coming their way. We like to stand up for the rights of the little guy. And as part of that, we've always had, I would call it more than a handful, couple, 3, 4 handfuls of personal injury cases that have really just come word of mouth from the folks that we take care of every day, members of the FOP. And over time, that has grown, and then something kind of changed in the last few years. There are some things that have changed for us. Nate Nelson with Nelson Jones, tell us a little bit about what's going on with the firm.
Well, we focused pretty much everything we do on the FOP, right? And the guys and the service and the gals that, everything they need, and develop practice areas for that. And here we are, 13, 14 years later, it seems like, and we were able to build a new building off of 90th South. So we're in a location where, 60 to 80,000 cars a day are aware of us and see us, and kind of have more of a general public presence, I guess.
Yeah, we built that building in the right location. Like you mentioned, 60 to 80,000. I think I did a count and estimated it could be close to 80,000 cars every day. And so with that came an opportunity to spread the word on some of the things we do for the good people at the FOP. And we've decided to broaden our advertising, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is that as you start looking at advertising, and, people that are injured in an accident, sometimes they don't have a lawyer in mind. They'll get on the internet and, they might search for injury lawyer or this or that. But there's a synergistic effect we found when you have a presence online, you have your website, you have your Google magic, the Googler. No, don't forget the Googler. The Googler, we got a full-time guy on that Googler. But anyway, but the billboards was something that was suggested. Not everybody does it. But why did you feel, or I know the answer to all these questions, which is really odd, as I sit here and interview about stuff that,
You're
we
asking
talk about
good questions,
all the time. Yeah. It's my job. Why billboards?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, right? I mean, considering the membership, right, and who's on the legal plan, a lot of the guys don't know that we do stuff outside of the admin, the post, the critical incidents, and that we offer these other services at a discount, right? I mean, going back to what I said originally, the entire practice area has been developed around them. And, the best way to kind of help them understand, because they recognize, I would say most of them, the law firm's name, right? Nelson Jones.
Sure.
But they don't know exactly what we do outside of the things that we do for them consistently every day. And, the best way to tell them that is to, put it on a billboard.
Yeah.
So they make the connection.
Can we just go into, for the members, how this works for them? Because it's not part of the legal plan, correct?
Well, correct. I mean, we have certain things that are covered under the legal plan, and then things that fall outside of that to make sure that all of their needs can be met, right? We roll those services out. They're outside of the legal plan, but we still give them to the FOP membership at a discounted rate. And so, like, for example, on personal injury, you're going to have reduced contingency fees. We're also trying to roll out, some sort of contribution to the FOP Foundation on any case that's referred through the FOP membership and that the firm handles and resolves. And so, we got to get specific on details, but, generally speaking, we're thinking 1% to 2%, right, of the amount that we're able to recover. And then, there will be differences on cases that are litigated versus settled pre-litigation. But yeah, we want to, help the FOP membership outside of what's covered under the legal plan through the discounted rates.
Yeah, and the way that ethics works in advertising, we're not allowed to pay referral fees. It's not like realtors that, can do some of that stuff. We're prohibited. And so we look to areas that we can contribute, and that's usually charities. And so where the FOP Foundation is a charity, it's set up as a 501c3. Have that right, Brent? Is that yeah? It's 501c3. So it's there's a benefit to everybody involved, the foundation itself, the membership indirectly, and then us, in making that donation, which we're happy to do, because everything we do, there would not be the opportunity to do these things were it not for the work that we do for our very, very special clients. So,
well, and on that, I think it's important that the listeners, and especially the FOP members, understand that, look, we're cops. We like stuff cheap. We like stuff free. Our legal plan, we've talked to other states and other states that have tried to mimic what the firm has done for us. They can't touch it for the amount that we get ours for. The way to keep that low is to have the firm be able to expand in other areas. And in order to expand in other areas, you have to have the accommodations to do it. And so the ability to build that building and being able to save on costs, and doing everything that they possibly could to keep those costs down, to make it feasible, is all in benefit to the membership to do everything. Look, other legal plans their plans are skyrocketing, and that just comes with time. But the way to limit the amount of how that goes up, it's directly impacted by what you guys are able to do on the other side, and by expanding those services, by bringing in specialty attorneys that deal specifically with personal injury and things like that.
Nate, for the listeners, I mean, we throw around, fancy words sometimes. I think most people know what a contingency fee is, but do clients, when it comes to personal injury law, do they ever pay out of pocket for attorney fees?
No, that's the basis of a contingency fee. Basically, the attorneys that handle the case get paid from the settlement, right? If there is no settlement, then the attorneys don't get paid. So there's nothing being paid out of pocket by the clients in the personal injury cases. A conventional contingency fee is going to be 33%. Ours will be reduced and will be, I would say, at least 3 percentage points below that for the FOP membership. And so, yeah, they're never out of pocket anything. It's just come see us when you're injured and we'll take care of you.
Okay. So a question for you. I'm going to paint a picture for you, and I want you to do some legal analysis. All right, we're going to talk about injuries. All right, so there I am in my Chevy truck. I'm at a stop sign, and I haven't even left the stop sign. I am static in the road, waiting for my turn, and here comes Travis on his scooter. And he hits me 40 miles an hour, wrecks the side of my truck. You know, his helmet that he's wearing, you know, well, sometimes for the scooter and sometimes just because he needs one in public. It bounces off my window, breaks my window. And
his condition supplements mug also hits the truck.
It hits the truck. So it's damaged my vehicle. But the only ones with injuries are I'm not injured. Travis is injured, but he calls the firm. And he says, hey, there's this guy in this Chevy truck. You know, I want some money. I got injured. What do you do with that case?
Well, I mean, every case is fact dependent, right? So, I mean, just looking at this generally, 30,000 feet, right? I mean, it looks like my guess is you were stopped, right? He runs into you, right? The question is, did the party that hurt you, right? Did they breach some sort of duty that they had that caused you damages, right? So in your case, I mean, you're stopped. Travis has an obligation to avoid you as, you know, somebody that stopped in front of him. So not all injuries necessarily are going to be viable cases that you could seek redress on, right? You know, you, by contrast, would have, if you're not injured, you got hit by a scooter, right? The back of the vehicle. There's different components of personal injury cases. You've got, you know, bodily injury, you've got property damage claims, right? So there's different components there, but, you know, to be able to analyze that, we have to sit down and talk about how you were injured. There's also things like injuries at work, right? Those aren't necessarily the kinds of injury cases that we handle.
Well, no, don't confuse me. I mean, I'm not an attorney, right?
Well,
wait, I am. So going back to this fact scenario, so you would not take that case. Let's be fair. Like, Travis did it. It's his fault. You know, he's the one that was not paying attention.
Let's push it a little bit further. Let's say it's dark, right? Mm-hmm. Your brake lights are out.
Right.
You have no other lights, or let's say you have a trailer and there's no way for Travis to see you. Right. I mean, there's a possibility. It's remote, but I mean, these are the fact-dependent inquiries that we have to make to make a determination.
So you're saying that if I had no lights, maybe I'm violating an ordinance?
Yeah.
And he hits me because of my negligence. Now, maybe he's got something.
Maybe.
Now you have to buy him a new condition supplements mug.
Yeah.
So the point is, you got to sit down with these clients. You got to talk to them, at least talk to them on the phone, figure out what's going on. Ultimately, we're looking for injuries where you were not at fault. Fair statement?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but it's hard to say. You don't make assumptions, because we could easily have made an assumption that was just all Travis's fault. Because, I mean, look at him. However, if there were other factors at play here, maybe ones that you hadn't thought of, still good to talk to an attorney. Let's figure this out.
Well, and a lot of times, you know, law enforcement officers are hurt at work, right? And that's a workers' compensation issue that's covered under the legal plan, right? But sometimes there's third parties that are responsible for the injury, even though it occurred at work, that, you know, redress could be sought from.
So let's talk specifics. Give me an example of what would happen where you would have a claim on workers' comp against the employer, but maybe some other claim against somebody else.
Well, let's say you're driving down the road in your company vehicle, right? Somebody runs a red light. Okay, you get hurt, you're at work. Workers' comp is going to take care of the injuries and try to nurse you back to health, those sorts of things. But you had that third party that was responsible. So you can go after that third party for the injuries. Now, workers' comp is going to, you know, file a subrogation interest against the recovery that you make. And that's something that we handle as part of the personal injury claim, is working through that with workers' comp to figure out what they get to be satisfied for what they paid out on the injury.
Using fancy words again. And so subrogation is essentially that, you know, there's a benefit that is extended to you by virtue of your relationship with the employer, that workers' comp company insurer is entitled to get some of that money back from that third party.
Correct. They're going to pay for all of your injuries, right, and make sure you get nursed back to health or whatever.
Right.
And the providers, right, the workers' comp folks that paid for that are going to want to be paid back essentially out of the settlement against the third party. That's what the subrogation interest is.
Got it. Wow, you learn stuff new every day in this podcast.
Okay, we've got one for you.
Okay.
So we've got agencies that
Stump the dummy. Let's go.
That of late are requiring their officers that have take-home vehicles to get a separate insurance policy to cover above and beyond a certain amount and things like that.
Oof.
How does that come into?
That's a big problem
play?
there, guys. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, and we're seeing this with risk management, all over the place. It's something that's occurring, really throughout the country, where in order to try to save a buck, cities will come in and say, well, look, you're going to take that car home. And so possibly you're not going to be, quote unquote, at work when you're driving that vehicle. And so therefore we want you to have a supplemental insurance coverage to take care of you if you, are in an accident and not on the job. Here's the problem. And it goes to the misunderstanding that, some folks have about when the duties of an officer, when they extend to where they have to take action, where they can instantly go from off duty to on duty. Give you an example, anytime that there's a crime committed in the presence of an officer, anytime that there's an emergency, albeit maybe a roadside emergency or some other type of emergency, you can be minding your own business on your commute back home at the end of your shift and have to instantly go and under color of law, color of authority, do what cops do. Now, is a city going to come in and split hairs about, well, at what point were you on duty? What point were you off duty? It's a disaster. You can imagine the types of problems that will occur.
I don't know,
in that
Travis,
type
do they ever do that?
You're retired. You can answer those questions. It's a mess. It's a mess, and we don't like to see it. We get that the officers feel like there's a benefit to not having to buy another vehicle. They can take that patrol car home, and there is some value there, but there's an equal, maybe greater, I would say greater value to the city to have an officer at the ready 24/7, no matter where they are in this world, or at least in Utah, and they're good to go when it hits the fan, because you can't predict when it's going to hit the fan and when you've got to do what you got to do.
So maybe they should stop stepping over dollars to pick up dimes.
Absolutely. I think it's from a public policy perspective and just in consideration of everything that could go wrong, I think it's a bad idea.
And that's why, these agencies allow these guys to take the cars home, right? Because there's a benefit to the public at large. But one thing I'll say, just generally speaking on insurance, right? I mean, the policy minimums that are required, if you have the unfortunate experience of getting involved in an accident with someone that has the basic, insurance policy in place, you are going to wish that you increased all of the insurance on your end to make up for the fact that their coverage was bare bones. And so, we've talked about at some point having clinics to help people understand what their coverages are so that if they are involved in an accident, they're covered, right? Brett's point is, look, these guys are always on duty when they're in their vehicle, right? And I think that's a good stance. But then the other thing to consider is, look, are there places where we can make sure that we're covering ourselves in the event that we're involved in an accident with someone that's basically inadequately insured?
It's super interesting stuff. In fact, I'm enjoying this game of Stump the Dummy with Nate. I would like to do that.
I think I won.
Well, that's good. We'll see.
We'll let the judges decide.
Yeah, maybe 1-0. Can you stick around a little bit? We have some more questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to wrap this one up and get on to the next episode. But listen, again, if you're listening out there, you're probably working, you're probably in a patrol car. Be careful. Be careful what you're doing out there. And, if you get into some trouble, you need the firm in internal affairs. Hope that doesn't happen to you, but you know who to call. But if you get injured in an accident, as the billboards say, it's 801, help now. And I'm certain of that. I'm certain of that. 801 help now. And Nate and I went on a diet, so we're going to get some new pictures and new billboards soon.
Yeah,
it'll be something tasteful.
Can I get the surplus ones?
Absolutely. we can put those in your on your farm.
Yeah, I've got to cover hay real well.
I've got him talked into doing a George Costanza dual pose.
Oh, yeah,
let's
absolutely.
get the couch. Yeah.
So watch for those.
Absolutely. Coming your way. All right. That's a wrap on another episode of Covered with the Utah FOP. Stay safe out there.